All right, welcome to Hoopstracker. We have a special guest, Jerry Howard, your host. We have Kelly Sopak from the Cal Stars, also the head coach of Carondelet. Did I pronounce that right, Coach?
Carondelet, but you wanted to
Carondelet
sound
High
fancy.
School
That's good.
out of the Bay Area. You actually CIF Coach of the Year last year. You've won multiple high school titles, but we're bringing you on to talk about this last weekend was the Mamba Invitational, League Invitational. Nike brings in the top 32 players across the country, and Colorado just happened to have two present. Bree Crittendon, who's one of the top players. I think she's top 5 in the country right now by some of the rankings, and Reece Gilpatrick, who just blew up on the scene as an upcoming freshman, going to be a sophomore. Coach, talk about the Mamba League Invitational. This was the third year. Kind of what was the process? They bring the kids in. I know there was some trainings, talks, but talk about the event and then team selection a little bit.
Yeah, no, they did it a little bit different this year in year three. This was the third year of the Mamba, second year, I believe, for the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, they brought some players in. But what Nike decided to do this year is they aligned this with their Nike Skills Academy.
Oh,
And so the players came in. So out near Thousand Oaks. That they
mhm,
arrived, I think, on a Tuesday. So
mhm.
they had training, skill development games from Tuesday through Friday. So they had 4 days. They had guest speakers. They had some all different things, strength and conditioning. They had yoga mixed in there. They had breathing exercises mixed in there. We had film session with them. We had, again, skills breakdown. They
Wow.
were, divided by positions at certain times, divided by their ultimate Mamba teams. And
Mm-hmm.
so we played a bunch of scrimmages while we were at the Skills Academy. So that was, in and of itself, was a phenomenal week. If you were
Yeah.
fortunate enough to be a part of that, that would have been enough. But as Nike is, they went over the top. And so after our session on Friday morning, they loaded everybody up in the Mamba vans and went down to LA and LA Live. And then we had I think they had a dinner on the court Friday night, and then they had the
Uh-huh.
games on
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday.
Now, were you part of the I know you've been involved with Nike for quite some time, but were you part of the Skills Academy working with the players at the Skills Academy, or did some of the coaches come in later?
No, I was there all week. We actually arrived. Coaches arrived on Monday because we had all the, you know, kind of the informational sessions to get ready for the players arriving. But yeah, we were there all week. It was men's and women's combined. So there was I couldn't even tell you a number of how many coaches and guest speakers were there at the Skills Academy. It was phenomenal. As a coach, leading groups, I probably learned more than I gave. So it was a phenomenal week, tiring week, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet it was exhausting. So, Coach, with the Mamba Invitational, there are two Colorado players, Bree Crittenden, Reece Gilpatrick. Talk to me. You've seen a lot of the top players in the country. Talk to me about these two and their what kind of impact they made on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was closer to Bree because she was on my team,
Hmm.
but having to coach against Reece, I'll kind of speak on her first. Transparent. I'm probably the worst for knowing players outside of our region or nationally ranked players or anything of that nature. Unless
Hmm.
they're one or two, I don't really read too much. Um, but I had heard of Bree. I had never heard of Reece. And she was impressive from the start in the Skills Academy. Her speed, and I'll back up. In front of all of that, both of their attitudes were phenomenal. So Colorado should be extremely proud. Their high school coaches should be extremely proud because they really represented themselves professionally in a great way and just left an impression in that way. But Reece was not fun to compete against, but from not knowing her to seeing her over the course of a week and her skill set was really good. Um, Bree, I was able to coach a lot more because I had her all weekend at the Mamba. I had
Mhm.
her during each at least one session during Nike Skills Academy. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I was 6 days with her.
Yeah.
Just a phenomenal kid.
Mm.
Actually, her little brother ended up being our ball boy, so I got to know him really well. Um,
Okay.
he can harass the refs just as good as I can, so that was fun. But I think for Bree, um, she has a chance to be really special.
Yeah.
She's all the tools are there. I think it's now for her, just can she put them all together, and can she take that next step to being a pro? And that's, again, not to talk too much, but stepping
Yeah.
back, a lot of what the Nike Skills Academy was, and Mamba, you got to show that off, but the Skills Academy was really about letting the players intellectually understand what is it going to take to make that next jump.
Mhm.
They're there, all the kids that are there, they're already the quote unquote the chosen ones. They're already dominating at their
Right.
respected grade level team.
Mhm.
I think Cooper Flagg's mom had the best quote, if you're the best one in the gym, you need to find a new gym.
Yeah.
And I think for those kids, that's what the Skills Academy was about. For Bree, it really is. Can she make that next step? Because um, you know, out of those 36 or 32 that were there,
Mhm.
you know, maybe a handful have a shot, or legitimate shot at being a WNBA player, and Bree is
Oh, yeah.
one of them. She has the tools. It's just, does she take that next step? So I think wherever she goes in college, it's going to be I don't even know who she has,
Mm.
who her choices are, but just needs to be selected to make sure that that set of coaches can propel her to, possibly the WNBA and a draft pick.
Yeah. No, you've put a lot of players in college, and a lot of them have gone on. Obviously, the most famous one is Sabrina. Talk about that step going from high school to college, and then even from college to the WNBA. What has Sabrina and some of your other proteges shared with you on those challenges at each of those levels?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, you can, again, as we get older, we do get a little wiser because we've seen a lot of these things, right? And you
Yeah.
can start handpicking, and that's why I mentioned that about Bree is
Hmm.
she has the intangibles to do it. It's can she take that next step that you're inquiring about? And really, that next step is always that self-awareness and that improvement. And
Hmm.
those are really easy catchphrases to say, but
Hmm.
are you really going to get better? Because we all get better. If you do your job every day, you're
Right.
naturally going to get better. But
Hmm.
can you expand upon that? Can you not just, you went from ninth grade to 12th grade? Of course you got better. You were in the gym for 4 years. But
Right.
can you take that next step that those great ones take? And that's what, a player like Sabrina, Haley Jones, Cameron Brink, their steps, if you were to measure them each year of high school, each year of college, they probably were the most improved players on their team. Now
Hmm.
we think of most improved as always the player that can barely dribble that maybe could get through a drill at the end of the year. That's how we have been, I
Right.
think, trained into thinking most improved. But the reality is, those elite level players. You look at Kobe Bryant, speaking of the Mamba, look
Yeah.
at him and his shooting in his rookie year. And then
Hmm.
you look at his shooting, in the peak of his career and that level of improvement. And I think that's really what it takes. The other side is, I think, that chip on their shoulder, that competitive nature.
Hmm.
We had a lot of WNBA players that were either stopped by to talk to the kids or that were actually skills trainers, and they were able to share a lot of insight as to what it takes. Um, I wish that the players could have seen them how I got to see them as a fellow coach. Like,
Hmm.
they may be really nice and they're older now and they have great knowledge, but they've got that competitive edge,
Oh,
and you can spot it, right?
yeah.
So I would lean on them to say, okay, which ones have a shot here? And Bree was kind of unanimous one of them.
Wow. Talk about going from high school to college and how impactful the weight room and not just the weight room, but you're talking about the work ethic, the grind, and the competitiveness. How does that all play into a player and developing that player?
Great. Another great question. I always tell our players there's two things that you are going to wish that you did more of in high school when you get to college. And number one is strength and conditioning.
Mhm,
Because once they get to college, that strength and conditioning, for those that are in a program that don't do any of it or play around in the weight room, it's a
mhm,
it's a big obstacle for them, right? That they really have to train themselves to do it. That's why at our high school we really try to get them as college ready as we can, so at least that isn't such a big shock. The second thing is communication.
mhm,
Your ability to communicate on the floor, calling your actions defensively, especially that
mhm.
when players come back to the gym and they're like, yeah, this practice is way too quiet, right? The kids, no one
Yeah,
is talking, and let
yeah,
alone they have 15 guys talking at all times on defense, right? Everybody on the
right.
bench, the coaches, the players. I think
Mhm,
those are the two biggest things. And I think um, probably the other thing is um, your day-to-day work ethic, your consistency. Can you be consistent in your work ethic? In
mhm.
high school, for these players, so the players that were at the Mamba, all they have to do in high school to have success is try a little harder. They really don't have to do a whole heck of a lot more than that because they have some God-given abilities
Mhm,
and they're better than the average player. They're better than the above average player. So if they
mhm.
just try 1% more, they get immediate results out of it. When you go to college and in the pros, that 1% more doesn't cut it because the
Right.
guy next to you is going 10% more, 15% more. So, and that goes for playing time too. A lot of them struggle with that. Hey, I had a good week of practice. Well, you had 3 bad weeks of practice and somebody's outplaying you. You just have to wait your turn. So I think those are kind of the adjustments: consistent effort,
Yeah,
communication,
yeah.
and then, of course, the strength and conditioning.
Well, and like you said, coach, I mean, when you show up in college, everybody on your team's an all-state player, all region players. Some of them might have one, two, three McDonald's All-Americans right next to you.
Yep.
So how hard are you going to work? And that leads to kind of my next question. In the last couple of years, I would say you've seen more and more on the mental performance, helping, helping with the mental health side of these young women, but just actually that mental performance. How are you training? How are you, you mentioned confidence. You mentioned some other things. And when they show up in a gym and there's five other Eagles right next to them, sometimes that confidence, there's a little chip that gets taken away. How much has that really impacted the game, especially in the last several years?
It's huge, the mental side. And a lot of them, I coach players now that have mental coaches,
Hmm.
sports psychologists,
Hmm.
and I think that's great. It's a sounding board too. They get to kind of open up and they get to, I think, hear from a professional that what they're feeling is normal.
Hmm.
I have a saying that, show me a kid that's not confident, I'll show you a kid that's missing shots. Show me a kid that's confident, I'll show you a kid that's making a shot. And so the point behind that is, can you be confident and can you lead while you're not making shots? Because it's easy to lead and be confident when you're making shots. You and I could go out there and be
Right.
confident for as long as the ball's going in. But if it's a grind and the ball's not going in, how can you impact the game? And again, I thought both Reece and Bree were phenomenal with that. I don't think Bree had her best shooting performance at the Mamba or
Right.
the Skills Academy, but
Hmm.
she was one of those kids as a coach, just one of those glue kids that you really can't take off the floor because she does so much, and you feel a heck of a lot better when she's on the floor than when she's sitting next to you. But I thought she really displayed that part of her game. When the shot wasn't going, she figured out other ways to impact it.
Now, your team was, from my opinion, I thought your team was pretty loaded. You had Addison Bourne, Gigi Banks, Chloe Johnson, Jordan Palmer, um, Noelle Buffia. You had Bree that we've already talked about. You had Sharice Rainey. Kaylee Wynn didn't get a chance to play because she's injured, but but this team was loaded. When I first saw this team, I thought, man, these guys are going to run the table. Um, but you guys met up in the championship game. Talk about some of those other players on your team, like Addison Bourne and Jordan Palmer and some of those.
Yeah, well, first off, I was just glad Gigi Banks was on the team because not only is she a dynamic point guard, but I was taller than her. And
Yes.
so in the huddle, at least I tried to stand next to her. Everyone else was, 3, 4 inches taller than me. So that
Yep.
was it gets humbling really quick. Um, but no, Addison Bourne just phenomenal, just off the ball player, just her ability to cut. She had a good connection with Chloe Johnson. Both play all Iowa Tech EYBL together. They
Yeah.
they had some nice camaraderie as far as when they play. They kind of knew what each other was going to do on their back cutting. So that was great. Jordan Palmer, interesting. She was probably the one I pushed the most. Um, and it was at the end of one of our scrimmages because we played about 4 or 5 scrimmages leading up to Mamba,
Yeah.
and we got in transition. I think it was Bree. Bree got out in transition kind of at the end of the game and took a shot, and it ended up going in. But Jordan went up like she was going to rebound and pulled down the rim. And she's kind of, again, she moves at her own pace. Not huge high energy. I had no idea she could, just leap like that. And I asked her, I said, "Did you grab the rim on that?" She goes, "Yeah." Like I was crazy for asking her, but just extremely athletic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Gigi Banks is just phenomenal. I mean, her 0 to 60 time
Yeah.
is unbelievable. Her ability just to get to the basket and
Mhm.
and finish it at the basket. And Jerry, I always take these when you coach in these type of environments. I
Mhm.
always look at those to, okay, how do these kids compare to like what I'm coaching in high school? And I've got a really good high school group. But someone like Gigi, her ability to finish in traffic, with big bodies and still be able to finish and going, we don't have anybody that can do that, nor does anybody else in the country, right? Because she is one of a few. Um, Noelle was to me a huge surprise. Um, just her ability. Hey, we played one of the games at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I think it was 93 degrees outside, so it was about 115 on the court. Noelle might have been the only one that didn't get tired. She can just run forever. So, and she's going to North Carolina, so she's gonna, yeah. And I don't think she's been playing basketball that long either. So her
Uh-huh.
upside is tremendous.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say when you were talking about Gigi, I was like, man, she reminds me a lot of Jordan Canada.
yeah, yeah.
Small, lying in the paint, have no fear. I don't care if you're 6'8" or 6'4" or whatever. I'm coming in, and you got to be prepared.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do Nike just does such a great job with the Skills Academy. We do exit interviews with all of the players and through
Mhm.
through the whole camp, and I did mine with Gigi, and I explained to her her EYBL team beat us twice this year, and we just couldn't stop her.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, I use you as an example in my recruiting of players, that you get a chance to go up against a Gigi Banks, that is not normal. You can't just run to a regular AAU tournament and find a Gigi Banks.
Right.
You've got to go to the Nike circuit. You've got to find a kid like that, and if you're blessed enough to keep in front of her, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
The
Coach,
Chloe Johnson, real
yeah,
quick before I forget her,
yeah,
she's only a freshman. She's going to be phenomenal.
yeah.
I apologize for the noise here. Um,
No, you're good.
but yeah, she can shoot it. She can handle the ball better than I thought coming out of Nike Skills Academy, under duress. And I would say that was the whole thing with all of our players. We really only had one point guard, in Gigi, but everyone on the team, had to handle the ball, and that was great to
Mhm.
see. 6'2", 6'3" wings handling the ball like they did.
Oh man, that's great. Coach, I know Nike's getting ready to ship you off to China and you guys are going to do a big camp out there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for talking about Bree and Reece, and um, we wish you well, and we'll be following you, Coach. Thanks a lot.
All right, enjoy your stuff, Jerry. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Bye.